And we are back after a 5-year break. It's the Kim West Radio Cycling Show. We don't have the music. We'll see if we can dub that in later. But I'm delighted to have as my first guest after the long hiatus, Steve Fuller, who just finished Ride the Divide. I've been dying to talk with him about it. I think I got a hold of you, Steve, sometime during the race itself, or toward the end, saying, "Hey, you want to come over and do a show sometime?" Is that right? Is that how it happened?
That sounds about right.
And to explain some of the background noise, we are at the Iowa State Fair campgrounds. We're in the Dome of Truth at the Dorr Plaza, and as evidence from last night's efforts at doing a podcast, you don't know what's going to happen here. We've got bugs in the background that hopefully will be drowning out most of the extraneous noise. But anyway, so Steve, you did this little bike ride.
Yeah, it was a nice little affair. We went from Banff, Canada to Antelope Wells, New Mexico at the southern border.
And for how many miles?
Just shy of 2,800,
okay,
including some navigational mistakes and side trips and all that kind of fun stuff.
And what prompted you to want to do this? Because I've known you forever, and you've been a bike rider forever and into racing eventually, right? But this stunned even me. Like, what the hell is you thinking?
Well, I quickly realized after riding with all the fast guys around here that I'm not built to ride 50, 60 miles as hard as I can in 2 hours. My strengths lie in outlasting other people, either by fitness or by abject stupidity. And so I started in on the whole kind of endurance racing gravel grinder scene and started doing longer and longer races.
Over what period of time? When did that start happening?
Started about 2008
okay.
with Dave Maple's Cup of Dirt, which was try and ride at least 100 miles on gravel at least once a month.
For a year?
For a year.
And did you do that?
Got pretty far.
Okay.
I got 12 of them in. I didn't get like one every calendar month like I was shooting for, but after watching G. Pickle's attempt in 2007, I'm like, that sounds like a fun thing to do.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And then the races just kept getting longer and harder and dumber and
like what?
The Cup of Dirt led to
and the Cup of Dirt, you just go out and ride a century.
you just go out and ride.
Yeah.
Just whatever pace you want, whatever route you want, as long as 80% of the route is not on pavement.
And all self-reported,
Yep. Honor system.
Yeah. So no structure at all.
No structure, no UCI. Gentleman's agreement.
Right.
Like the good old days.
Yeah. Yep.
So that led to a run at the Dirty Kansas 200. So I entered that 4 times, finished 3.
Okay. When was that? When was the first time you did that?
First one was in 2008.
Okay.
So I did 2008, 2009, went back in 2010, skipped a year, and then went back in 2012.
Okay. And we assume that everybody knows what that is, but that's a 200-mile gravel race down in Emporia, Kansas. The first weekend of June.
Yes.
Yeah.
Crucible hot. Usually strong winds. If you're unlucky, some big plains thunderstorms and some winds to just kind of round the whole experience out.
Probably some mud somewhere.
A little bit of mud, usually.
Yeah.
Somewhere along
Sometimes
the way.
a lot. And that's not. We've done that. My Stoker Sue and I have done that on tandem, and that's a bitch. That's real hard. So
it is.
What kind of times were you turning in that?
First 2 years was 19 hours.
Okay.
The second year I finished a 19-hour time, netted me a top 10.
In what? What category?
In the men's open.
Really?
Yeah.
What year was that?
That would have been 2009.
Wow. Must have been some bad weather.
Hot. Unbearably hot. Okay. High of like 105 in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
And I can take heat pretty well. And again, maybe dumber than most people. So
Yeah.
just kept riding, kept taking breaks, and
Yeah.
kept plugging along.
Wow, that's impressive. And then, so subsequent years, what'd you do?
The last year I went down was 2012, and I finished in, I want to say, somewhere between 13 and 14 hours.
Wow.
Decided I wanted to go back and definitely finish faster than I did before, so I put a little more concentrated effort into preparing for that race. Started down the path of having a coach get me prepared, and that actually started a fairly long relationship with my coach, JJ Bailey, who got me ready for the Tour Divide and some other races in between 2012 and now.
At what point then did you decide you wanted to do Tour Divide? And how long has that been around?
So the Tour Divide race has been around a long time. I can't remember the exact number of years. It actually started out as a gentleman's race between, I want to say, Mike Kiriak and John Stamstead. And it was actually, at that time, it was basically border to border, and it was just called the Great Divide Mountain Bike Race. And then a few years later, a gentleman named Matthew Lee took part in that. And then he decided that there was more of that type of road and terrain available north of the border into Canada, and so he, along with the Adventure Cycling Association, mapped out another almost 300 miles of route from Banff, Canada, down to the U.S. border where the Great Divide race started.
Wow.
And so this whole route actually is meant to be toured over a period of about 3 months. Adventure Cycling conducts, guided tours along there, or you can take your own self-guided or group tour along this very same route, and their suggestions run that you ride anywhere from 45 to 75 miles a day.
And of course, you guys scoff at that, right?
That I had some days that were actually under 45 miles.
Yeah.
I had some days that were a lot longer than 45 miles.
Yeah. Wow. And this is all totally self-supported.
Yeah, you have to carry your own gear. Anything that you need for resupply needs to be bought along the route from a commercial source. If you know people along the route, you cannot accept anything from them, whether it's food, housing, a shower, anything like that. Trail magic, and we put that in air quotes, from locals is allowed. So if somebody along the route wants to leave a cooler of drinks out at the end of their driveway for racers to use, since they're a route local, they're allowed to do that, and we're allowed to take those things if we see them.
That's cool. Okay, but we're jumping ahead because you're still just doing Dirty K and riding more and more, right?
Right.
And JJ's got you doing stuff. What kind of stuff does he have you doing? Because Trans-Iowa figures in there at some point, right?
Yep. So after my last Dirty Kansas finish, I decided to go back and prepare a little bit more, in a little bit more organized manner, for another shot at Trans-Iowa, which I had tried 2 times in the past and failed at both attempts for various reasons.
And Trans-Iowa started off as a race across Iowa on gravel and B roads, but then it just sort of quickly changed to about a 320 mile loop.
Yep, it's
around.
Yeah, it's 320 to 340 miles. It went from a point-to-point format to a loop format, mainly because of the organizer, Mark Stevenson's desire to keep a little bit closer track of the racers, make sure they're safe, but still give them the distance and experience of, the varied terrain that Iowa actually offers.
Right. And that's usually held when?
That race is held the last weekend in April, which means the weather is a complete crapshoot.
It really is. It's either really crappy or really good.
Yes, I got fairly lucky the 2 years that I finished, which was 2011 and 2012. Take that back. 2012, 2013. Shit, I can't even remember. 2013, 2014, somewhere. Anyway,
Yeah, you finished a couple of years.
I finished a couple of years. So yeah, we had generally pretty good weather both years. The second year that I finished, we had a little bit more rain and lightning, but the first year that I finished, the weather was actually pretty pleasant for end of April in Iowa.
Sometimes it can be just a total mud fest, and there have been times when it's either been called or nobody finished or whatever.
Yeah,
right?
this year's a perfect example.
Yeah,
You got one guy that makes the first checkpoint at 43 miles, and nobody else makes it in time. So
Yeah. And again, that's totally self-supported too, right?
yes,
If you leave the route, you come back on at the same point.
exactly.
So all this time, JJ's got you riding these. I assume he's also has you doing off-bike stuff, right?
Yeah, I was when I was kind of in the program with JJ. I was doing a lot of weightlifting during the winter. Would do running and hiking, just as a little bit of cross training. Cyclists, we like to ride a lot, and we end up with little tiny pipe cleaner arms a lot of times. That doesn't usually end up working out too well when you've got to look at the potential of lifting a 50-pound bike over piles of trees or pushing
Right.
it through snow or
Right.
across big fields of mud.
So there's not only the riding and the gym work and the running road work sort of stuff, but also then you've got to consider your choice of equipment, bicycles and camping equipment, and nutrition, all that crap, right?
Yeah, it's if you're a person that likes to research things and
Like
figure out,
you.
yeah, and honestly, it's figuring out the puzzle. It's finding all the pieces that fit together that make for a successful race, or what you think is going to be a successful race.
Okay.
And like you say, bike, camping equipment, how long you think you're going to ride during the day, your effort, how much food you're going to eat, and and the whole race itself is a puzzle. You can go in with a plan, and that can go out the window within the first couple of hours.
So when you started working with JJ, because I remember you meeting him at the coffee shop for breakfast, and you talk about things. When did the specific planning and training for Ride the Divide start? How many years out?
So I really started preparing for the race about 18 months out from the race start, which was this last June. So
Had he been coaching you though for other events like DK and Trans Iowa?
yeah, so he'd coached me for Dirty Kansas, both my Trans Iowa finishes, along with I had him help me with some training for the Dakota 5.0 mountain bike race.
Okay, all right. So you were familiar, and he was familiar with you, and so forth. But to go from a one-day race like 5.0 or Dirty Kansas, or a 2 or 2 day race like Trans Iowa, to a 3-week thing, right? How did the focus shift?
So I had JJ and I met over some drinks and kind of discussed what I wanted to do, and I actually gave him some homework to do in the form of some reading, so he could read stories that other people had written about the race.
Because this is
and their
totally new for
experiences.
JJ too. He's a triathlete coach, a cycling coach. I don't know if he does any running, but this is like as alien for him as it is for, more so than for you.
Yeah, I think it was a challenge for him on how to approach it. In the end, it's an endurance race, but being a multi-day event does add some complexities to the situation. So I gave him
such an understatement. Okay.
I gave him some time to kind of chew on whether he was comfortable coaching me for this.
Right.
Because obviously my success or failure is going to weigh weigh on his his reputation.
Now, in addition to the various resources that you can find and that JJ can find, there are people that you know that have done that and competed at Ride the Divide and have done well, right?
Yes.
Local folks, I mean local in a statewide sense.
Yes, Mike Johnson from Cedar Falls finished in like 21 days 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm. And Mike does all sorts of long distance type nonsense.
he's in kind of the same vein I am. He does a lot of 100-mile and longer, both gravel and mountain biking events.
Yeah. So I assume you picked his brain.
Mike and I had a lot of talks to and from races and just weekends riding together over dinner, phone calls.
Yeah.
And then there were two brothers, Matt and Sean Arndt, that went out last year and raced.
Are they from Nebraska?
They are actually from here in Des Moines.
Oh, okay, all right.
They got as far as southern Colorado.
Okay.
And ended up running out of, I think, both time and a little bit of enthusiasm or drive for the event. They had extremely bad weather for the first 10 days last year. Other than like one day, the typical weather pattern for them was high in the 50s and rain. The first few hours of the first day, they were riding hub deep in rain and slush. So their experience last year was much different than mine this year.
Yeah, because I remember seeing the photos from the start for you guys, and you could just sort of tell on the faces there was some enthusiasm, but it was well-tempered enthusiasm. But it looked a little chilly, but not bad, right?
No, it actually was a really comfortable day to ride at the start. It was probably, I'd say, 50, 55, 60-ish. I mean, it was comfortable enough to ride without, full set of leg warmers and all your keep warm gear on.
Right. Okay, so you give JJ some homework to do and so forth. At that point, 18 months out, where were you in terms of your equipment research and decisions, both bike and camping and all the various bags and all that kind of stuff?
I'd been doing some what they call bike packing, which is basically bike touring without panniers and racks, and mostly off-road. I've been doing some of that off and on for the last couple of years before the race. So I had a rough idea of the equipment that I was going to use. A lot of it boiled down to finding things that were smaller, packed smaller, or weighed less, or were more durable and less fussy. So I did quite a bit of reading and picking at people's brains on stuff, but I tried not to get into like equipment spec paralysis about anything. Finally just decided I'm going to pick this, I'm going to pick this, I'm going to pick this, and then started using the equipment as much as I could, and figured if it had a flaw someplace that I couldn't live with, I'd figure it out somewhere in the 18 months leading up to the race.
Yeah, okay. And what about your bike? How did you decide on what bike, and what did you decide on?
So I ended up riding a Salsa Cycles Fargo.
Okay.
Mine was made out of titanium. Pretty stock bike, titanium frame, titanium seat post, carbon fork. I had a steel version of the same bike that I'd used on some other long events, and it was really comfortable, and just basically went with comfort and, again, something a little bit lighter and maybe just a slight bit more comfortable. Titanium's a really great frame material to ride with.
Because Sue has had issues with saddles over the years, and because no matter how much you ride on a regular basis, to do a 3-week plus competitive ride is going to have different demands on your saddle and your ass. Did you do anything different with your saddle?
I tested 4 saddles before I settled on a saddle that I was going to use for the race. And even then, by the time the race was done, the saddle that's on the bike now is not going to be the saddle that stays on there.
What's your usual saddle?
I usually use, I've found like the Brooks B17 leather.
Okay.
Very, very comfortable.
Okay.
I have that on a lot of my bikes.
Kind of heavy.
Kind of heavy, but comfortable.
Yeah.
And comfort is, in a race like this, comfort is much more important than saving a couple ounces here and there.
Okay.
So I made a decision to go with their non-leather version, the C17.
Okay.
And I went with the one with the cutout. Again, a little bit less pressure. And it worked out okay for rides around here of like 2 or 3 days. But I had a lot of issues with specifically the rivets on the back of that saddle, causing not only my clothing issues, but causing me issues. It took a little bit of time to figure out what was going
big, fat,
on.
flat rivets?
Big, fat, flat rivets that are flat but stick up a little bit from the saddle surface.
That sucks, doesn't it?
Yeah. So sent an email to Brooks when I got back. Sent them some pictures. Let them know they might want to go back to the drawing board on that saddle.
Yeah.
And I'm either gonna sell that saddle mounted on the wall as a historical artifact, or just take a grinder to those rivets and make it more comfortable for me.
That's been my beef about Brooks. I've got one that's 40-some years old, and I'm still, short rides is one thing, but I can't imagine sitting my butt on that thing for very long.
If it wasn't for the rivets, I actually would have been really comfortable in that saddle. I mean, it was that was the right choice.
Okay.
It's unfortunate it didn't agree with my rear end a little bit more.
What about handlebars?
Drop bars, which is what came on the Fargo.
Okay.
Drop bars and aero bars.
Okay.
Double wrap the handlebars, double wrap the aero bars. So I had multiple hand positions. Big flat sections of the route, like through the Great Basin in Wyoming. Pretty flat, pretty windy. Set of aero bars to take a little pressure off your hands, and also hang lights and GPS and all that kind of stuff off of. Makes for just a little bit more comfortable cockpit.
So all this time, you're trying to dial in your bicycle, and you're trying to dial in your training, your mileage, and types of miles and so forth. And we'll get to that in a bit. But also nutrition. Not only what you eat, but what can you find that you can eat, that you can train for. How'd you do that? I mean, what did you know about where you could get food and what would be available?
So it ends up being a lot like what you'd find on riding gravel roads in Iowa, just a lot more spread out. Diners and convenience stores and bed and breakfasts.
Dude, you posted photos of some pretty nice meals. That's not Casey's.
When you got into town, every once in a while, there were some very nice restaurants. Sometimes you found them, sometimes you didn't. But that whole area caters to hunters and rafters and fly fishermen and tourists, and so even the diners and the bars along the route have pretty decent food.
Disposable income people?
Disposable income people.
Okay.
To some extent.
And you knew that your conversations with Mike and other people and reading about it, so you knew what. So it wasn't like, and I remember when Breedlove was doing races, and he would try all this weird experimental type, powder crap and so forth. Okay, not an issue.
Nope, never. If I couldn't find it in a convenience store or a grocery store, it never entered my mind to use it. So there was never a goo packet or any Hammer Perpetuum or anything like that.
How much food did you carry with you on your bike at any one time?
I tried to carry between 4,000 and 6,000 calories at any one point.
So like less than a day's worth of food? You were always that close to food, or what?
There's a lot more opportunities to get food along the route than you would think.
Yeah, because I wouldn't think there'd be much.
I did lose a lot of weight during the race. I ended up coming back 15 pounds lighter than when I left.
Have you gained it back?
I've gained quite a bit of it back.
Yeah.
I'm still it's distributed a little differently now.
Yeah.
Maybe a little more muscle and a little less fat now.
Yeah.
But never had. There was one section towards the end of the race where we're going across the Gila Wilderness in New Mexico that we knew was probably going to be a good 2 days between any resupply of any sort.
Including water?
Including water.
Wow.
It ended up being that there were places to get water along there, but you had to be really sharp about looking for them and taking advantage of them when you saw them. Could be a creek, not so much in Mexico, but big water storage tanks for livestock. As long as there weren't signs around that said no trespassing, those are fair game, especially if you've got a water filter with you, which I did.
Okay. So I want to get back to the race itself, but I'm still real curious about the kind of training that you did, because you're doing, you talked about doing, 2 or 3 day rides with this saddle and that saddle, and I remember all the posts. I'm going to be riding, such and such this weekend. Anybody interested in coming along? And I'm always curious if anybody did, but also what did JJ have you doing? Because all my years of training, I think, okay, well, I've got, so many hours I got to get in this week. I know what I got to do, right? I got to do sprints, I got to do intervals, I got to do, LSD ride and all this kind of crap. But when you're doing something with some serious terrain changes and day after day after day, what did he have you doing? What did your weekly or monthly plans look like?
So weekly plans from a time standpoint ranged anywhere from 12 hours kind of at the start of the 18-month cycle up to 25 to maybe 30 as we got kind of into the March-April time frame. And depending on where we were at in that cycle and other events I was doing, honestly, a lot of it looks kind of like typical road race or triathlon prep. A lot of time on the trainer in the winter doing intervals of various intensities. To simulate hills during the winter, I did a lot of high resistance, low RPM intervals to simulate climbing. Those would start out being 5 minutes long, and you take a 5-minute break after each one, and then by the time you get through a cycle and you start getting stronger, then it's 15 to 20 minutes of that, and then a 5-minute break, and then that kind of cycle. And those are over the space of just 2.5 hours.
Okay.
Long, slow distance rides on weekends when time allowed.
And those are the ones where you throw the bags on and you go camping, or eventually, or what?
When I started getting outside, I wanted to make sure that I was training on my race bike with race weight as much as possible, just to get used to the handling. Pedaling a 50-pound bike around some of the hills southwest of town makes you stronger. You can't necessarily keep up with the guys on their cross bikes, but that's not necessarily what you're out there for. So every ounce of weight on the bike was just that little bit of extra strength building that I was able to do to prepare for the race.
Did you know, is it the same route every year?
It is generally the same route every year. The Great Divide Mountain Bike Route, like I said, is out there. It's published. Usually right before the race, somebody that is in charge of the race for the year will send out some notes about reroutes. Typically, there aren't any reroutes during the race, unless there's something pretty major going on, like a lot of snow cover that makes it dangerous to walk, or fire, forest fires, stuff like that. especially down in New Mexico.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. You know, snow, you sort